Disappointingly, this is Hitman 3 VR Reloaded gameplay on Quest. Oh, and by the way, that I mentioned, this title is a Meta Quest 3 exclusive. Comparing this to other VR indie games, it's obvious Meta has favoritism over certain games than others when entering the storefront, as there is no way anyone in QA should have thought this game was prepared to release, and is one of the worst ways to showcase what's currently possible with standalone VR. Hitman 3 VR Reloaded went from number 6 in the top selling games this week all the way back to number 22, and it goes without saying that this is one of the most disastrous releases in recent memory. AAA VR games in 2024 don't exactly translate to quality. I could start this video by endlessly bashing the game, and it's deserved, as anyone with a pair of eyeballs can see how terrible it looks visually, but the good thing is that the foundation / framework of a good Hitman 3 VR game is there. When the game does work and you begin exploring the world of Hitman, this is one of the most ambitious Quest 3 games available, with large open areas to explore, with a large count of NPCs, various world interactions, and passable AI. But it was packaged the wrong way and it needed more time to cook in the oven. Now it's the question of whether the developer of the port, who is XR Games, does the necessary work. Except I subscribe to the idea of never purchasing something on the thought or promises of what it can become in the future. I've been bitten by too many games already. During my first initial playthrough on release day, I encountered various issues. I couldn't jump in right away as my left controller was in RMA for stick drift, but even before then, the reviews started to pour in. Then I started to play the game from the many game crashes, constant frame stutters, realizing you can't manually reload at all, atrocious lighting to the point where you can't see anything in the dark, or flashbang by the sun itself, extreme cases of anti-aliasing, also known as jaggies, NPCs spawning right in front of you, people clipping left and right into each other, no diddy, getting shot through walls, and oddly, I didn't capture this moment since the game is a direct port of the 2D version. I was able to play the game on a 2D screen, which occurs during every cinematic, and oddly was way better than the VR version. Also noting that cutscenes, it renders at a native 72 Hz. It was trippy, but it only ever happened once, and then the game crashed. There are fun and funny moments in between, and the formula of Hitman is made more apparent in the later levels of the game, and the first intro tutorial levels are by far the worst levels in the game visually and gameplay wise, but given the current state of the game, it isn't even worth purchasing yet, and charging $30 is charitable at best, as even I myself purchased the game at launch, refunded, and purchased the game after seeing the response the developer gave 4 days after the initial launch. That said, when making of this video, I really wanted to look at the day 4 patch notes and compare side-by-side footage of Quest 3 gameplay on release day and the day 4 improvements. So far, all the footage is on release, and I know I can boot up Quest Games Optimizer, but graphics and resolution are two entirely different things, and I usually judge games based on how the developer intended the game to be experienced. I love Quest Games Optimizer, it's essential for every Quest 3 owner, but developers should do their job, as resolution is part of the issue, though in this game, many issues are rooted in just lazy implementation of everything from the cutscenes, cinematics, awkward navigation between menus, clipping issues, and things not appearing like they're supposed to. Even with these issues, you can still play the game through and through like I did. It just isn't the most pleasant experience. Even with the game being made in VR, I feel like 95% of what you can do in the game could be done more comfortably with an Xbox controller. It lacks what makes playing games in VR special. With the day 4 patch, they've responded to the feedback and mentioned how they've listened to feedback carefully, identified issues, are implementing fixes, improving the game, and mentioned that the initial release of the game didn't meet their expectations. But seriously, apart from the obvious PR speak, why charge $30 and release something you aren't okay with? And taking a backseat, I'm not outraged. Once again, we're talking about a video game. This is another missed opportunity to finally deliver a good stealth assassin action single-player game on Quest. In a blog post, the founder and CEO of XR Games on record said, "We've spent the past 3 years working hard to deliver an incredible Hitman experience for untethered VR. which is the biggest cap I've ever heard. For me at least, this game joins the other AAA games on Quest that did the bare minimum with ports of Grid Legends VR, Medal of Honor Above and Beyond, Bulletstorm VR, Sniper Elite VR, and hopefully not soon to be released this year by none other than XR Games, Zombie Army VR, which are funded by none other than Mark Sweet Baby Ray's Zuckerberg himself. And look, I don't want to be that guy, but leading up to release, I was kind of expecting this, considering no reviews or impressions of the game were made, and the first initial announcement trailer out of any gameplay they could have chosen, this is what they showed. Fast forward, it mentioned an entirely new cel-shaded art style to make up for Quest 3 shortcomings. It mentions an entirely overhauled user interface with the quote-unquote completely redesigned for VR, improved movement options, visual enhancements, redesigned gameplay mechanics, and dual wielding. The dual wielding is true, but from the outside looking in, it looks like an attempt at a quick cash grab. Considering if you played the PCVR version of Hitman, this is that version ported to Quest, and they didn't even bother to add more VR mechanics. It's an exact 1-for-1 port minus the better visuals. To climb anything, you still have to scroll your thumbsticks, vaulting objects, or carrying bodies. You just press the button and your screen turns pitch black, which in certain areas you'll be in complete pitch black for more than a couple seconds. Sneaking out of windows to walk on the outside edge is an awkward gameplay mechanic. You can even manually reload your weapons in VR in 2024. There are so many issues with the game that it'll have to be a completely different experience in order for me to recommend it. Since XR Games has Zombie Army VR slated to release in 2024 this year, I doubt they completely abandoned Hitman for the sake of saving face. Even so, the PCVR and PSVR versions of Hitman still suffer from the same issues, and they aren't hindered from running off a standalone headset. So when the game's description mentions leveraging the power of MetaQuest 3 to deliver truly untethered VR experience, I couldn't even come up with a bigger life myself. Since launch, Hitman received a patch in day 4 detailing major additions, with the first being significant improvements to LOD popping, adjusted level of detail distance, meaning world elements will appear much further away, added a stabilizer for the sniper rifle while aiming down sights, while by the way, handling snipers in this game is still absolutely broken. Increased crowd sizes and their co-distance, which is the method to improve frame rates by not rendering NPCs and despawning them depending on the distance to the player's camera/view. Fixed Dartmoor library agency pickup and small tweaks too, with lighting balance between light and dark areas, interactions, reduced animation slicing for distance, NPCs, and crowds, and various other fixes throughout the game, like lighting in the core chamber, which was really needed. I couldn't see anything. I said hi to the other person in the window, they said hi to me, and this guy started shooting me. Now with the graphical comparison, I'll be going over the tutorial level, Death in the Family, and the Venera, and the Farewell. There's only 5 real levels inside the game. Hopefully down in the future, I'll be doing another comparison if the developers are true to the word. I did record a sizable amount of footage, but most areas, I'm not gonna lie, look the same. There isn't much of a groundbreaking difference, so I should interchangeably change the footage so you can see the full 16:9 content captured in 1440p, but we'll see. First of all, the game does make use of application space warp, meaning the game only renders at half the frame rate at 36 FPS compared to the native 72 FPS. Application space warp synthesizes new frames through frame extrapolation and frame rate projection. Although not affecting input latency, it does directly affect visual latency. It's much less snappy than a game running at a native frame rate. I personally don't love it. Hopefully in the future Meta adds in the description if a game utilizes, because I think immediately out the gate it affects the experience. I personally don't love it, but depending on the scope of the game, I'm willing to overlook it, like in a game like Medieval Dynasty, if developers make use of it and simply don't use it as a means to not optimize their game. Hitman VR is a mix, as there isn't anything anything quite like it on the Oculus storefront, I mean MetaQuest, or should I say Meta Horizon storefront, but the implementation of application space warp is on the developer. Since developers are already targeting low frame rates, and depending on the resolution in which the game renders, aliasing becomes really bad. Image clarity suffers a ton, and just looking at some of the comparisons, this is a major yikes. The major changes being crowd sizes and their code distance, so it doesn't look as apparent of random NPCs teleporting right in front of you as you approach areas of the game. It's a very small change, but along with the visual comparisons on this channel, I put time aside to play the game, and the difference is noticeable, but ever so slightly. Better than it was at launch. Far away NPCs are rendered at a much lower frame rate, and if they get far enough, they end up despawning. Apart from the optimizations and technicals, the biggest issue seeing the footage and being inside the headset is just the execution. Their decision to go in the route of using cel-shaded art and labeling it as a simply new art style is mediocre at best. It looks like everything is done in claymation. In the tutorial level, which I consider the worst level to introduce the character not only visually but mechanically, it's a major turnoff. I know it's meant to introduce the player and get them comfortable with the mechanics in the game, but all the level does is expose the very limited VR interaction the port has. It's the first glimpse of the game you get, and if I wasn't reviewing the game for the channel, I would have immediately refunded it without looking back. And the only good impression I got from the level is that because it's so short, you'll still qualify for a refund if you're under 2 hours of playtime on Meta storefront. Once you complete the tutorial, the best level in the 5 levels available is Death in the Family. It captures and still holds the essence of Hitman, with being able to encounter situations the way you want, a personal highlight in my playthrough, and although the biggest hit is in the graphics, you could tell, it's quite impressive for Quest. I know we made a major jump for Quest 2 to Quest 3, we're still running everything on a mobile platform being rendered twice for both eyes, so performance always takes a noticeable hit. The indoor interior is also improved after the update. The improvement to the LOD popping with patch 4 is a big upside, so objects don't magically appear out of nowhere, so if you're much further away, the context of the scene holds up much better. When it comes to certain areas of the game, in which I will say certain parts are impressive, like being inside the city, but stuff generally falls apart with lighting / shaders. Entering certain areas of the game, I wonder if they even had people playtest the game, as in the patch notes it mentions improving light and dark areas of the game. In some areas more than others, on the left hand side you can barely make out what you're looking at. With the last part of the comparison, I wanted to include the farewell level, by far the biggest and largest open area in the game in terms of exploration. At first it looks absolutely cooked, looking like a game straight out of N64 with the scene, but as you make your way to the event it gets better. But funny enough, you can see one of the news camera guys missing his camera and awkwardly staring into the void. And that's to say, I'll end off with the comparison rolling in the background. Is Hitman 3 VR Reloaded the worst game I've played this year? No, but it's easily one of the largest disappointments this year. I haven't looked at other opinions or videos to avoid regurgitating the same opinion, though it's hard to avoid the headlines. The reviews, even for a Quest game, are polarizing. As making this video, it has 367 ratings, with 41% of those leaving a 1-star review, but 24% left a 5-star review, which, I mean, even in the best case scenario, this game doesn't reach that acclaim. Then 4 stars at 14%, 3 stars at 11%, and 2 stars at 10%. However, the commonality between all the reviews while reading them just comes down to it needing work, updates, improvements, and better controls. I don't subscribe to the idea of giving game scores just should I get the game, wait for a sale, or completely avoid it. Currently, it's an avoid. It has potential of becoming a good to even great game, but the developers blew it. The state of the game is extremely bare bones without any improvements, making it a true VR game. Hopefully they add more on top and bring even more content like DLCs, but I highly doubt we'll see a major change soon, as usually Quest 3 enhancement upgrades take upwards of 6 months to a year to get out the door. To end the video, like always, that's my Hitman 3 VR Reloaded review. Down in the comment section, let me know what your thoughts are. Have you tried out the game? No, hopefully not. And are you hopeful for a fix? Suggest stuff for me to cover or review. NFL Pro Era should be next, but we'll see. Leave a like or dislike down below, and until the next video, subscribe for similar content. See ya.